few months ago, my uncle, who is running a personal business, got a complaint from his regular customer. It wasn't just a sound engineering company, and their complaint was that every time a delivery comes from my uncle's business, a lot of its female employees' belongings goes missing. So my uncle paid a visit to the office, and together they rewinded the CCTV to find out what was actually going on. And surprisingly, my uncle's employee had been stealing female employees' sanitary pad every time he made a delivery to that office. Well, later he was arrested to the police, and it was found out that he was an addict who was obsessed with female belongings. Well, this is just an extreme example of addiction. But addiction is actually more prevalent than we actually believe. I personally was an online game addict, a serious one, and I am a habitual smoker. So although I don't have any degree in psychology, I have a legitimacy to talk about it. Addiction is defined as the state of being enslaved to a habit or practice, or to something that is psychologically or physically habit-forming. Today, what I want to talk about is not the addiction that are caused by substance, but the addiction that has more got to do with psychological factors behind it. And I believe the best example to illustrate it is online game addiction. So, I want to share my personal experience with you. About 3 years ago, while I was in the United States, I was a serious game addict. I spent days and nights playing games, missing classes, skipping meals, and playing online games became the biggest part of my life. My life pattern got seriously distorted. You might not be able to imagine how serious it was, though to illustrate it, my girlfriend at the time cried many times begging me to stop playing games. Because she could see as from the third perspective that I was actually destroying myself. Sorry. However, it was almost impossible for me to stop playing games. The funny thing is that I didn't consider myself as an addict, even though most of the hours that I stayed awake were spent on playing games. Luckily for me, I had to quit playing games as I had to come back to Korea to join the army. Actually, quitting was first upon me. Later, I thought about why I got seriously addicted to the game that almost destroyed my life. I started thinking about the causes of addiction. Well, for me, the reason that I started playing game and got addicted to the game is pretty simple. I was having a hard time. My family at the time was going through a financial hardship. And the feeling of hopelessness, that there's nothing that I can do to help them, was devastating. So, well, to be honest, I was the one who was causing the financial hardship, as most of the income that my parents were generating was spent on my education and living in America. So to get away from the guiltiness that I had, I needed an exit from the reality. And playing game was it. Yeah. Playing game was the only thing that could enable me to forget the reality that I was in. And it was the only thing that could fill up my emptiness in my heart. Well, these days, as the restriction on the game, online game, have become a serious social issue, I realized that, unfortunately, the feeling of hopelessness that I felt was not a unique but a common one. I believe that the addiction has two parts. Addiction begins as we look for something that can comfort us. Addiction begins as we start looking for an escape from the reality. People look for an escape from the reality. They want to completely forget the thing forget the reality that they are in, and be a new person. In case of online game addiction, in the virtual world that they live in, they are the hero, they're the master, who are capable of making a huge achievement that they cannot even think of doing so in the real world. This is how they fill up their emptiness with fake achievement. However, this doesn't automatically become addiction. What you need is repetition. Once people find the joy from a specific behavior, they do it over again. And this becomes a habit and thus addiction. So how can you really be free from addiction that is potentially dangerous to our life? One thing we can do is accept the fact, the situation that you're in right now. As I said, addiction begins as people look for an escape from the reality. This is not a healthy way to deal with a problem. Nothing gets better until you do something about it. And the first step in dealing with any kind of problem is by accepting the fact that it's been already occurred to you. By doing so, you're preparing yourself to deal with the problem, fight with the problem that is in front of you, and not running away from it. This leads to higher probability of freeing yourself from addiction. Another thing that we could do is replacing the current addiction with a healthier habit. Well, it is extremely hard for one to quit something that became the biggest part of your life immediately. Therefore, by indulging oneself into the habit that is healthier, one is making himself less vulnerable to the current addiction, and thus will spend less time and less effort to the current addiction. I believe the Korean society made its people very vulnerable to addiction. High school students, they spend days and nights studying to get into a good university without truly knowing what they really want to do with their life. Once they fail the university entrance exam, it's the end of the world for them. They treat themselves as failures. Students in the final year of the university frequently have to deal with rejection as the job market got very, very competitive. They don't care what kind of job they get anymore. All they need is a job. And this emptiness in the heart of students makes them very vulnerable to addiction that is potentially harmful to their life. What I really want to say today is just one thing. Everyone goes through hardship at least once in their life. Everyone is susceptible to addiction. So when someone around you is having a hard time making himself or herself vulnerable to addiction, I want you to be the one to sincerely listen to what he has to say and to show some sympathy. In that way, I believe that the world can be a lot better place without addiction. Thank you.